So today we're going to discuss something that I really have never talked about in a video, and it has to do with censorship and what happened to natural health a few years ago. You're going to find this interview very interesting because, yes, it was very, very scary, but on a positive note, it has a happy ending, which I'm going to share with you. But I would say a few years ago, I can't tell you the exact date, but I know it was in May. It was all of a sudden, I went to my YouTube channel and literally, I couldn't even find myself. Before, I was like all over the place, and then you couldn't even find me. So I was majorly censored, and then I was told you had to take down a whole series of videos. So I took down all my cancer videos, and I put everything on Rumble. Anything related to vitamin D and natural immunity, I had to take those down. I had to take down anything related to COVID. Like, there was a whole thing. So I had to just take all these things down, and then they were going to give me a free pass. But what moved in was medical. And so instead of, if you typed in something, to find me, you had to kind of go way deep because they had Mayo Clinic, Harvard, all these different sites. And so I didn't know what was happening at the time, but now I know exactly what was happening. They used COVID as a Trojan horse to turn and rebrand natural health. And so today, I actually brought on a terrorist, or at least someone that was labeled as a terrorist, part of the Dirty Dozen. He's a very good friend of mine, a beautiful human being, Sayer Ji. Welcome, Sayer Ji.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Berg.
I just have a lot of admiration for you, what you've been through, but here you have this amazing channel. I interviewed you years ago, and you had this amazing channel with all this research, trying to help people with natural remedies, from sunlight to botanicals, all sorts of things. And somehow they targeted you as one of the Dirty Dozen. And can you tell us a little bit about, did they classify you under terrorist or what?
Yes, it sounds like a story too strange to be true, but it did happen. And yes, I, along with others, were basically labeled as domestic extremists. And DHS actually used the phrase terrorists at one point to describe those who were advocates of natural health, dietary lifestyle modification for making your life better and healthier, as well as those who were standing up for medical freedom. So that did happen in the window between 2021 until, really until the latest shift in the power structure.
Before we get into that shift, let's talk about what it was like. You had a website, you had a business, you had a YouTube channel. They just deplatformed you?
Well, actually, interestingly, as you pointed out, many people were starting to see censorship from the perspective of Google basically taking search results offline in 2019. And I know you were probably one of those because you, like me, have spent your life just sharing information that, we're excited to get out there. And so Google did their digital book burning event in 2019. It was August, where 99% of all natural health results when you search Google were removed overnight. And so that was the beginning of what we saw being kind of a nightmare when it comes to free speech and being able to share alternative views of health, which include natural, integrative, functional medicine. But it was really the Disinfo Dozen campaign that was initiated in May of 2021 that put us on the so-called hit list when it comes to being attacked.
Let's just take a look at your crimes, okay? Disagreeing with consensus. So when we talk about consensus, are they talking about really scientific proof, or is it pretty much just whatever they agree on? I mean, it's like whatever the medical profession agrees on, it's consensus, right?
I think you're really hitting the nail on the head. In fact, peer review is supposed to really produce a consensus on certain topics. So what I've done with greenmedinfo.com is gather, at this point, 100,000 published peer-reviewed studies in support of natural health. So you'd think that the consensus actually supports sharing that information, but because essentially we have what I think is better described as eminence-based medicine, versus evidence-based medicine, meaning historically the CDC has basically made pronouncements, sort of like proclamations versus, hey, here's all the research saying that ketogenic diet, for example, is not healthy for you. They don't do that. They tend to rely on people's blind faith and authority.
Yeah, and I think if we just look at the essence of what happened, it's because I looked through the policy, the YouTube channel policy on misinformation, and that is pretty much, if you disagree with consensus, then that is misinformation. I think you and I and everyone watching would agree that science is supposed to disagree. We made all the major discovery through disagreement, and now we have to. I mean, this has just gotten to the point where it's just so like, what planet? Am I in the Matrix? What is that going on? I mean, even like in the 21st edition of this book right here, the U.S. dispensary book, where this is written in 1926. This was a medical book, and like over 75% of the remedies were botanicals, right? Now, zero. So pretty much now here we are doing what medicine did way back then, and boy, it's like we get attacked. We get silenced. You can't talk about certain things, and it's fascinating because it's almost like, what side of science are you on? Are you part of our group of science, or are you on the real science? So it's really been frustrating navigating through all this, but I think someone like you that's been right in the middle of it, literally, it destroyed your business, family, everything.
It was very much like an inquisition and persecution, which I found to be almost poetic because, as you rightly point out, today people think in terms of, well, let's trust the science, or science is settled. And that's not what science is, actually. It's more a methodology of discovery and coming to understand reality, through testing and retesting and changing your hypothesis. And so essentially what, I found is that we have instead what's really scientism, which is, I think, a religion that has actually devoured all other religions. During the, so-called declared pandemic, some called a plandemic, what we saw was all our religious leaders, from the Dalai Lama to the Pope, saying, you know what, although we believe in an ahimsa, we don't believe in using, let's say, diploid fetus-derived tissue and injecting that into you as a violation of pro-life. They said, you know what, in this case, it's that big of an emergency that we have to suspend all our religious beliefs because science knows better. And that is what I call medical monotheism. So scientism inexorably leads to medical monotheism, which means there's no heterodoxy. You can't diverge or dissent from the standard of care, or you have to essentially be eliminated. And that's really what happened. I was labeled a heretic, and they said, off with his head, and essentially years of persecution because of my belief that you should be able to breathe without a mask, or you should be able to choose vitamin D and turmeric instead of a mandated pharmaceutical.
It's really sad, but on one hand, I'm glad it happened, and I'm going to tell you why. I want to just touch on this other organization. It's called CCDH. Tell us about that organization. And it's a very tiny organization. I think they have 15 staff. They're out of the UK. But they've influenced a very large population in the US, at least, right?
Yeah, they actually started in 2018 in order to affect the elections in the UK. There was a candidate, Jeremy Corbyn, and he was, on the left, and they were basically saying he's an anti-Semite, so we have to cancel him. I think later it was found that that probably wasn't true, but it was a very effective mechanism to oust him. So originally it was the Labour Party in the UK that set this up for political reasons. And then when the pandemic happened, they shifted gears immediately, and they used the same techniques, which included demonetizing opposition media. In the UK, it was called the Canary.
What does it stand for?
Oh, it's the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which is a Orwellian word, given they basically, spent many years inciting hatred against American free speech advocates who were all about, medical choice and parental rights and religious freedoms.
They're against hate. Well, that's great. That sounds like a great organization to support. Digital hate, right? And that you're thinking, well, how does that connect to you? Like, how does that connect to health? Explain that to me.
Yeah, so I think what it essentially is it is what's known as a cutout. So certain intelligence and government adjacent NGOs are created so that they can essentially launder free speech suppression. Because we have this great thing in the US, right, called the Constitution, and you're not allowed to say, even if someone is lying, the Constitution actually protects their speech. That's the farthest thing from me or any of the advocates like, our dear colleague RFK Jr. were doing when they said, hey, we care about children's health and we believe informed consent and gold standard science. I don't think you can call that hate, but they essentially used a playbook to try to characterize our speech as dangerous, irresponsible, and even violent. And by doing that, they put us in essentially a quasi-criminal status so that then they could deploy deplatforming, demonetization, and then even some, threats of lawfare happened in the United States at one point against the Disinfo Dozen for supposedly wrongful death because someone might have read something that we had written, and the idea was, they didn't get their 10th jab, so maybe we harmed them because, they're life-saving and they're safe and effective.
So this organization somehow was able to influence all of the major social media platforms, right? Somehow influence them to take out certain influencers, not just about COVID. If it was just about COVID, they would have just took that out, but it took down all of your stuff related to sunlight, walking, natural vitamins. I mean, like the whole thing, right?
That's exactly a great point, is that so greenmedinfo.com at present has 10,000 topics because I'm kind of an obsessive person when it comes to health information. It's been about 16 years in front of a computer looking through millions of abstracts from PubMed, which is the National Library of Medicine, to find the ones that are the clinical pearls that show, wow, natural health actually has some science and, maybe we should consider an alternative. So what they wanted to do is make it look like we only cared about vaccines. And we do have one database on vaccines. It has 1,400 studies, and it shows that there are problems with safety and also efficacy claims on some of the vaccines. So that is essentially why they wanted to take out my entire project and my life.
Holy macro. I mean, I'm just fascinated by some of the terminology, like their definition of misinformation. Misinformation equals natural health type activities. And I just want to bring up one interesting point, because if you just take a look at any nutritional bottle, there's going to be a disclaimer there to the FDA saying this has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So basically, the definition of a drug is anything that does that. And so there's all these disclaimers because they actually captured the definition to, if you were to say broccoli can do anything for prevention of any disease, then that could be classified as disease. And especially if you're selling broccoli or broccoli pills, and then all of a sudden you shift to the FDA, now that FDA is going to go after you. But what's interesting is the manipulation of just words, right? Drugs, disease, misinformation. All of a sudden, natural health has now become terrorist.
I mean, the reality is that in the state of Florida where I live, even today, unless you're a dietitian or a physician, you can't actually recommend, let's say, cherries for arthritis, even though Michigan State University found that it was more effective than ibuprofen, which actually has a huge toxicological risk profile. It's like Vioxx, actually. It has a lot of issues because that's a Class D felony. They eliminated naturopaths, nutritionists, and essentially you can't practice at homeopaths natural medicine here. It's considered dangerous and irrational. And yet the basis of all medicine really came from indigenous traditions. And so it's remarkable, but I think we know it has a lot to do with the fact that, yeah, exactly, Merck Manual. I have done a lot of reporting on 1899's Merck Manual. It's amazing. It's full of natural healing items, from glandulars to, herbs that were indigenous here. And so, this is a ongoing tension that has, been going on for really decades and maybe over 100 years, right?
What's really cool about this terrible topic is the happy ending. And I think this whole stress that occurred with you, and I think RFK was one of the dirty dozen as well, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was put on the list. And as you were pointing out, it's kind of a happy ending story because look at where we find ourselves now.
Like, out of all the places they would not want him to be, right over HHS, like running the show. Wow, what a turn of events. How ironic. And what I'm noticing too, even with your channel now, because they actually re-platformed you, right? They kind of said, okay, now you can come back in. I'm sure they gave you a lot of apologies and they were really sorry about that. And they probably, made up the damage. I'm sure they did that.
Well, what's the most amazing about the reinstatement of the 3 accounts actually they took away from me 5 years ago is actually 4 years ago, was that they said that they looked at the community standards and they should never have removed our account, which is pretty remarkable given I have a federal civil rights lawsuit against big tech for this very thing. So they actually did us a really big favor by acknowledging that it was actually their Alphabet CEO a month before the reinstatement who said it was government that essentially coerced them to do these things, which is a convenient excuse because they're also looking for protection right now from the EU Digital Services Act and the UK Online Safety Bill, which is essentially big tech is feeling bullied by these censorship forces now, even though they were the ones that deployed it at scale. Millions of Americans experience this. But, looking at things now restoratively, I'm very happy they've done that. It's a really good sign that those who were defamed and deplatformed, like myself, are being restored, which is an appropriate thing, I think, for them to do.
Well, here's the happy ending into this whole thing, right? If it wasn't for what just occurred, I do not think we would have the explosion that I see right now in natural health. People want alternative. They want lifestyle changes. As you know, and a lot of other people know, 80 to 90% of most chronic disease related to lifestyle. Yet we only study, the research is only 1.9% of that. So it's a very underappreciated, ignored area in healthcare. But that being said, this is what people really want. They want to be able to use these natural things. They don't want to be on a polypharmacy of drugs. RFK right now where he is cleaning house. And it's so funny because some people will say like, oh, he's not a doctor. Well, yeah, that's because we need an attorney that can clean up the amount of unethical things that are going on in that department for years, the amount of corruption. We need to clean house. We do not need to keep things the same. We spend, what, 4.9 trillion now on our healthcare? We have one of the worst rated healthcare systems in the world. So here we got RFK in, it's just like such a turn of an events, and he's cleaning stuff up, and you and I are supporting that. And so I think we've had some wins recently. You want to mention a couple wins that are going on recently?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct that what's happened is that about 100 times more people are awake right now to the importance of bodily sovereignty as a nonpartisan, grassroots, global movement, because without the right to determine what gets put into your body forcibly or, through nudges and coercion, you really don't have any other civil liberties because bodily sovereignty is the basis of all sovereignty. So I think that essentially what those who largely capitalized on this egregious violation of, I think it's essentially bodily sovereignty that occurred with the mRNA jabs, they're starting to wake up and realize that, wow, we can take back control of our health and our family's health, and they're embracing natural medicine and lifestyle changes and mindset at scale in a way that I could never have imagined. So we were just in Brussels launching the Make Europe Healthy Again Commission, which was an amazing event. And there is absolutely, I can see now, a spark that's been lit in every country, inspired by what's happening here. And I think that, ultimately, those who maybe were trying to do some harm or trying to profit off of the innocence and trust that people had in these institutions, they're starting to realize that, wow, we can take responsibility for our health and we can get empowered. And I'm just so happy to see it happen.
They're hungry for this. I mean, they want freedom to be able to use whatever they want for their health.
Absolutely. I think that they appreciate it more than ever because, there are still some really intense mandatory vaccine schedules, and the pharmaceutical agenda is extremely entrenched. But when you look at even the statistics of how many people embrace natural medicine or food as medicine, it's really increasing exponentially. And so, in part also because of the incredible work you've been doing, it's amazing to see people go to, media, social media, etc., to follow those they trust. And I think that's really a beautiful thing.
Big Pharma is at the all-time low trust that they've ever been. I mean, I think even in a couple of years, they've dropped like 28 points down, even lower. What do you think the playbook is now? How are they going to be able to control the narrative? What are they doing in attempts to control the narrative now?
Well, I think that you and I have both observed that certain influencers that are claiming that they're doing, their service and their communications, not because they're being paid, but just because they care so much about sharing the benefits of pharmaceuticals and vaccines and totally attacking natural health. It's clear that there's a lot of money under the table that's being exchanged. And I know that recently there was even an investigative piece of Dr. Mike, which was stunning, that he claimed, hey, I'm not being paid by pharma, and yet there's $1 million open source example that pharma actually has him as a consultant. So I think that's one of the ways that they're really trying to manipulate, is going direct to certain influencers.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's just like a wave of influencers that are coming out and talking about these talking points. They're not like blatant, buy this drug. They're very carefully crafted messages that navigate through the waters. And if they're talking about, let's say they want to support junk food, they're not going to say to eat junk food. They'll say there is no bad food. You shouldn't demonize any one food. As long as we have it in moderation and you exercise, those cornflakes would be okay. They're actually attacking the competition. So they're hardcore going after RFK, Maha. They're going after me, going after you. And they try to find something that we said on the internet a long time ago and take it out of context and try to invalidate it. But what they don't realize is that they're just bringing more attention to the people. Are not stupid. They're bringing more attention to the issue, and they end up helping our message. And so they're going deeper and deeper in the ground. I think that what I would recommend reaching out to these people, what I would do if I were them, is I would just listen to what people want, come clean, make up the damage, and focus on what people want. They want to be healthy. Let's focus on that rather than trying to tear someone down. And also, people don't want you to take money from big industry or big corporations. They're not going to trust you anymore once they find out. And unfortunately, 95% of all these influencers that are taking money are not disclosing it. And it's just a matter of time before they get found out, because I think there's a $50,000 fine. So unfortunately, they're going to be in big trouble. But it's just all new right now. This is a new thing. This is a new way to control the media, or at least attempts to control the media. And on the good note is it's really helping our cause of just wanting to do natural health and do it more of a grassroots, because people can see through these things.
I would agree, because if they hadn't tried so hard to attack and defame and distort individuals like RFK Jr., there's no way that he would have had the mass popular support that actually got him into the most powerful position to be able to actually implement the reforms that we all know we need. So I think that playbook is now outdated, and even the way that they've tried everything in their power to take me out and to try to hurt me. The reality is I have more people that have, been with me on this journey like yourself that have provided me so much support. And what I mean by that is spiritually. That's the only thing that has gotten me through this, is people that have cared, who resonate with true statements, and then they go ahead and they, join this movement. And so I hope that we can get to a place where Big Pharma eventually realizes that, you don't necessarily need to make 1 million times your profit margin, by deceiving people. You can actually have an honest business model where the people you're working for, patients, for example, consumers, you're actually trying to help their bodies. And I mean, I know it's a little bit naive, but I really think maybe they'll join our movement. Maybe they'll embrace Maha. They'll have happier lives and families, and that they can, do better for themselves in the world. That's what I know. You and I really believe in peace, and that's what we want.
I just wish they used a much better picture of you, because when that picture that they used to push out there, I don't know where they found it, but it was like you getting up in the morning and I'm like, what? You could have used a much better picture.
I finally actually was able to get Wikipedia to use my professional picture too. Someone was helping me, because they just do a screenshot to make you look as villainous as possible. But the reality is I'm not a villain. I'm actually a pretty nice guy.
You're not just a nice guy. You're one of the most beautiful human beings I ever met. I mean, you're just the essence of you is just total caring and love. So I appreciate everything you've done.
Well, thank you. And it's amazing, because I feel the same about you. And I think that's the beauty of what's happened, is that people have come to really find their soul family, with all of the stress and the division they've tried to sow. It's really just brought us closer together, and we're stronger than ever. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sayer. I appreciate it. And we'll continue this conversation.
Thanks so much.